Shalom, guys. The last few days after the video that I posted regarding Pastor Gino Jennings, my comments box has been full, and there's been a lot of interaction and exchange, some snarky, some not, some interesting, and some I'm really wondering if people even read their Bibles or if they watched the video. So I've got some more stuff coming up that's going to directly address some things with Pastor Gino Jennings. However, what I would like to do tonight is I'd like to cover a couple of the common verses that keep coming up in my comments section. So let's get ready to take a look at a couple of these comment verses, and we'll see what Scripture says. All right, guys, so as I promised, what we're going to do is take a look at a couple of the comment verses and see what Scripture says versus what maybe what we've been taught. Because I know certainly I used to think some of the things that I am being told or that I was being told in the comment section, and I even did that as a seminary-trained pastor after 8 or 9, 10 years in the pulpit. Okay, so I was not inexperienced nor without knowledge. What I didn't know was that there were some other things going on that I wasn't fully aware of. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to flip over here. Let's see, I'm going to change this right quick. We're going to go to, let's just go to the home page. Can we go to the home page? All right, so I would like to start by introducing y'all to a tool that you can use. When a pastor tells you something, or you're hearing things from the pastor, and he says, this is what the passage says, or whatever, there are tools that you have available to you right there in your home where you can go do your own due diligence, your own research, and not just assume that some man is telling you the truth. Now, sure, I imagine that Pastor Jennings probably means well, but there are more than a few things that he has said in the not-too-distant past that do not line up with what Scripture actually says. So let me give you a real quick background. Something to understand is that the Scriptures were originally given in Hebrew and Greek, and we have hundreds and hundreds of ancient Hebrew manuscripts and thousands of manuscripts in large or in part of the Greek texts that most of our modern translations are based on. Now, the best modern translation, or the best initial English translation that was probably used by most people for a long, long time, was the KJV. However, more and more additional manuscripts have come to light, which help to give us a deeper understanding to what the word or words actually say in many different places. And so it leaves us with some, down the road, it leaves us with some better translations that are based off of a more complete Greek and or Hebrew manuscripts. So, kind of lay that as the foundation for you. And what I want to do is I want to introduce you to a tool. This is a tool, Blue Letter Bible, that you can go to online. It's titled blueletterbible.org. This is free. It takes a little bit of work to learn how to use it. I'm going to show you a couple little tricks, but tonight we're going to specifically use it to look at a couple verses that Pastor Jennings has used at other times, but particularly got thrown around a whole bunch in the comments section of this last video. And so I want to show you how to use this tool so that you can take a look at some things yourself and do your own due diligence. Okay? So, with Blue Letter Bible, what you can do is you can choose what translation you want to work out of. The KJ is there if that's your preferred translation. My personal preferred translation is the NASB, or the New American Standard Bible 1995 edition. Not the newer one, but the older one from 1995. Seems to be one of the best modern translations that there are. There are a couple others different people have different favorites. The beauty is that you can choose what you want. You can compare translations. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So we're going to take the NASB 95, and I will flip back and forth with the KJ so that you can see, draw some comparisons and that sort of thing as we go. I'd specifically like to go to, let's go to, there are a couple of passages in Scripture where Paul uses the term, he says, an elder is to be husband of one wife. Now, this is a passage that, people want to run right out and say, hey, look, it's right here. Okay, so let's take a look at that, and we want to look at that verse from a critical standpoint and take a look at what is behind that, okay? And so for those who are interested in Bible study and understanding what Scripture says instead of just arguing over a few little ideas, this is going to be a good video for you, okay? So I think we can go to, I think we're looking at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. Okay, so we're going to go there and we're going to hit the search button, and it's going to pull up 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse. It's actually got the whole chapter right here for us. Okay, so we can see the chapter in context. Before we dive into this particular verse, and there are a couple other verses that are parallel to this, parallel passages that say basically the same thing. Could be an elder, overseer, could be a deacon. But what we want to do is we want to look at this from a critical standpoint, and let's do some thinking, okay? We're going to engage our brains, and we're going to specifically seek what is it that the Father has for us here, okay? Now, as a tool, I want to introduce you to this. It's got tools for each verse, okay? So if we select the verse, it will pull the verse up in Greek along with all of the specific words. So, for example, the word overseer, just as an example, the word overseer is right here. It will tell you everywhere else it's used in this translation. Right here, it will tell us the Greek word that it comes from. You can even find out what it sounds like. Now, I didn't adjust the sound for this, but here we go.
Strong's G, 1985, episkopos. Episkopos.
Okay, so episkopos, if you're interested in how it's pronounced. Now, I love his strong southern accent with that. It's not always super accurate, but it's pretty close. It helps. And you've got the transliteration right here. You can see right here, episkopos, right here, for the word. And then other things that you don't, as you get better with using this tool, you'll find it right here. But as an example, if we were to go here and click on the word, it'll pull it up and it will show us every use of that word in the text, okay? So that word's actually only used 5 times, and it's used 5 times in 3 different forms, okay? And so that would tell us, and then it will tell us every verse that it's used in, so we can do some comparison between the verses and how it's used and what the value of that particular word is. Now, we're not interested necessarily in this particular word right now, but here we go. Okay, it shows up in Acts chapter 20, verse 28, Philippians 1:1, 1 Timothy 3:2, Titus 1:7, which is one of these other passages that we would be looking at for tonight, and then 1 Peter 2:25. So there you go. Those are the 5 uses of that particular word. The point that I want to make, though, is to show you how the tool can be used, because then we want to go down and look at some other things. Before we go there, though, I want to show you the tools right here for the verse that we're looking at. You can pull it up and it will give you interlinear. You can look at Bibles, which would take us to other translations. You can look at cross-references. There are commentaries, though I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of most of the commentaries that are on here because I find that many of them are steeped in tradition, and it may be a Presbyterian tradition or a Baptist tradition or a particular theological tradition instead of what does the word say. I don't care what traditions say. I don't care what Christendom says. What I want to know is what does the word say. Okay, just because a bunch of men decided that it should be translated a certain way, I should be able to go in here and study it for myself. it would be important, just take a real quick side trail here. In fact, it might be in this same chapter, or is it in 2 Timothy chapter 3? 2 Timothy chapter 3 is where it says, all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for correction, for rebuke, for doctrine, and for teaching, or training in righteousness, I think is what it says. I'd have to go back and look at it to get the wording exactly right. Some of you have that memorized. But when Paul wrote that, what was Scripture? Okay? What was Scripture? Was he talking about his writings? Was he talking about the Gospels? The Gospels hadn't been written. They actually were written after the Pauline letters were written. They were written much later. What was Scripture to Paul? Well, Paul was talking about what we would call the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, the Torah, the law, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings, okay? What we would commonly call the Old Testament, okay? So that's what he said is profitable for doctrine and for teaching and for instruction in righteousness and for rebuke and reproof, okay? So when we need to understand that we have to be able to go back to that as well. The basics tonight, though, that what I want to show you is that we can use this to look at this particular verse, and the real phrase that we want to look at is husband of one wife, okay? Because very commonly, everybody says, see, right there it says one wife. But they don't stop and engage their brain, and they don't understand how to use some basic tools to take a look at what was really written by Paul and not what the English translators transferred to paper. Okay? So let's take a look at this right here. We're going to look at husband of one wife. The first thing that we should do before we go into this is take a critical perspective to it and say, okay, husband of one wife, does that mean that Abraham would be disqualified as an elder in a little congregation? He's the friend of God, probably spoke with Yeshua or the angel of the Lord face to face. He is called the friend of God. He's the father of the faith. Yeshua says, or Jesus says, that he will be reclining at the table in the kingdom. Would he qualify as an elder in your church? Barring that right there. How about Jacob? How about David? David wrote Scripture. You read Scripture that David wrote from the pulpit. You sing psalms that David sang in your worship of the Most High. You talk about him as an archetype of the Messiah, the King of Israel. He's a warrior, right? David, who did everything right in the sight of the Lord except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. That's what Scripture says. It actually says it, I think, 4 different times, at least 3, but maybe 4 different times where it says David did what was right in the sight of the Lord. A man after God's own heart. Would he qualify as an elder in your congregation? He was king of Israel, an author of Scripture. Would he qualify as an elder in your congregation? How about Moses? Would Moses qualify as an elder in your congregation? See, most congregations today, if any one of those men showed up at the door with their family, they would be turned away and sent out. They'd say, no, you can't come in here. And that's a fact. So that should scare you right there and go, wait a minute. Something right here doesn't sound right with this husband of one wife. Maybe we need to start digging. So let's do that. Let's take a look at this. Let's click on the verse, and it's going to open it up here just like I showed you a second ago in the Greek. Okay? And it's Greek and English. So this shouldn't scare you. I don't want this to scare you. What I want you to do is look. You've got all the words right down this side. An overseer then, and then it's got the Strong's word, and the Greek translation of the word doesn't really matter. But let's go down here. He must be above reproach, the husband, okay, of one, right here, one wife, or woman, gune, woman, right? One woman. It doesn't, the the word wife wasn't even invented until somewhere around the 15 or 1600s. It comes from a Germanic word for waif, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But the word one right here, we need to look, this is what we need to look at, because if that really means singular one, then that means that some of the people who wrote Scripture, some of the people called, men approved by God, Hebrews chapter 11, some of those men wouldn't qualify to even be elders or deacons in your church. And that should make you stop and think, okay? Going, wait a minute, something's not right with this picture. So let's take a look at what this word actually means, okay? So if we click on the number for the word, that's the Strong's number, and that's actually, it takes you to a place in the Strong's Concordance that lists every name, every word in the Hebrew or in the Greek. It's got G for the Greek words, H for the Hebrew words, right? Most of the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, some of it in Aramaic, some in a couple other languages too, if I'm not mistaken. But the vast majority of it in Hebrew, and then all of the New Testament in Greek, okay? So if we scroll down here and we look at the Mia, there are a bunch of different uses of the word Mia, okay? But the word typically means, in most cases, now this has got 229 times because that's also translating all of the haste and ace uses, okay? So the word actually is part of a larger word group right here, okay? But we know that this particular word that we're looking at, Mia, it can mean one, and that's the way it got translated most of the time, okay? It can mean a, okay? It can mean other, it can mean some, okay? So it's been translated several different ways. This says primary numeral or one, but also it can mean abundantly, man, one, only, other, some. So there's some other uses or other words that can potentially, or other English words that can potentially be translated by this word Mia. So we have to ask ourselves a question and go, and I want to show you one other use that doesn't show up here, so we need to go find it because, and I don't know if we're going to find it in the list here. I want to go to Acts chapter, say, 20, I think is where there's a use of the word that we should be interested in. Mia, because it's actually used a different way there, but it's not listed here, which to me is a little bit curious. So let's go to Acts chapter 20, verse 7, right here. That's the word Mia. That's our word, G1520, but it's translated as first. And I know that 9 times in Scripture it shows up that way as well, first day of the week, because 7 times in Scripture, first day of the week is a reference to the day of the Messiah's resurrection. First day of the week, okay? And the phrase is miaton sabbaton, okay? And literally it means one of the Sabbaths. But they often translate it first day of the week. Now there's a different problem with this particular thing here that would be worth studying at a later point. But right here I want to introduce you to the fact that Mia can mean first day or can mean first. So it can mean one, it can mean a, it can mean first, okay? So let's go back and look at our root passage right here. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of, and let's put a blank right here. I can't change that on the screen, but let's put a blank right there. Instead of saying husband of one wife, let's see if there are other words that are commonly translated as Mia that might fit better right there without disqualifying men that we know were elders and leaders of Israel and righteous men of God, right? I mean, I don't think any of us would dare to say that we are better than David, King David, or better than, I don't know any elder or pastor that would have the temerity to claim to be better qualified as an elder than Moses, who led Israel for 40 years in the wilderness. I'm just hazarding a guess, okay? So let's look at this. The husband of a wife. Would that make sense? Possibly. How would that make sense? Well, let's read a little bit further and see what the reason for this is, okay? It says, prudent, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine or pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. So an elder must have a household, and he must have children in order to meet this qualification. That means he must have a wife, right? Is that true? So we could easily understand right here that this means that he must have at least one wife, okay? Now, I know. Some of y'all are going, wait. You're only supposed to have one wife. And what I'm trying to show you here is that Scripture never says only one wife, okay? What it says here, what we understand from everywhere else in Scripture is that God never ever condemns anything different. He never condemns a single person, never in Scripture. Even calls himself the husband of two wives, and he does that at least 5 times. I showed that in the video a little bit ago about Pastor Gino Jennings and his claim that God only has one wife. Scripture doesn't say that, okay? Scripture clearly says 2, okay? So, right here, if we look at this, a wife means that he would have a household that he could manage and keep his children under control. So this means that somebody who is single or doesn't have a household probably doesn't qualify as an elder because they've never managed or taken care of other people. So the a wife, check, that works. One wife, okay, what if we use the word one? Husband of one wife, okay? Temperate, prudent, respectable. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control. Sure, he's got a wife and a household. So it checks that qualification, but it rules out men that obviously God used as elders. Excuse me. And would continue to use as elders. We know this. In fact, some of them will be seated on thrones judging the peoples at the end. Go back and look it up. Okay? So we've got that right there. How about first? An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of first wife, or Mia being first in a series or one in a series, right, is one way that word can be understood. Husband of first wife, right, temperate, prudent, so on and so forth. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But first would also mean that he is a covenant keeper. He hasn't broken covenant with the wife of his youth. Doesn't mean that he doesn't necessarily maybe have other wives, just like David did, or Moses did, or Jacob did. In fact, I did a video on Jacob a while back. I challenge you to go find it. Scroll back through my videos. It's not terribly long ago. That proves from Scripture that God created the circumstances for David to have 4 wives as the foundation for Israel. I know that's a tough pill for some people to swallow, but it's truth. It just is. You go back and find that video, and you will see that God designed and created the circumstances. He closed Rachel's womb. He opened Leah's womb. Then he closed Leah's womb and opened Zilpah and Bilhah's wombs, okay, and actually used the opening and closing of wombs with Rachel and Leah for the purpose of causing them to bring their maidservants. And then he rewarded them twice in that chapter. Genesis chapter 30, verse 6, and Genesis chapter 30, verse 18, the blessing of children by the maidservants is ascribed to the Most High. You just have to go read that. It's priceless, okay? And then at the very end of the chapter, not at the end of the chapter, at the end of the segment about the children being born, so it's somewhere around 30, verse 22 or 23, it says, and then God remembered Rachel and opened her womb, and she bore a son and named him Joseph. right? God created those circumstances. Would we say that Jacob is not qualified to be an elder in Israel? He's not qualified to be an elder in your congregation? See, if we think critically about this, we have to start going, wait a minute. Maybe this word Mia right here should not have been translated as one, but the people who translated it a long time ago were wearing glasses that had only monogamy doctrine all over them, and they couldn't see what was really written in Scripture. Did you ever stop and think about that? Or do we have to make excuses and say, well, God used to keep rules one way, but he doesn't keep rules that way now because God doesn't have equal weights and measures, and he can't make up his mind. He keeps changing the rules. Right? See, that's another problem if you want to say, oh, no. They could do it, and God just kind of winked at sin, right? He killed the guy. He killed the guy who was collecting sticks on the Sabbath. He killed Uzzah for touching the ark, right? He struck down others for very minor, or seems like very minor things but he's going to let all of the patriarchs commit adultery? But see, that's because most people have the wrong definition of adultery, and I've covered that in previous videos as well. What you need to do is go back and study what does Scripture say. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10 has the definition for adultery. It's a married woman who breaks wedlock. It's never a married man. Now, a married man's responsible for whatever he does. You poke it, you own it. Okay? Now, that's a little crass, but it's the truth, right? You're responsible for it. Okay? That's where you can hold men accountable. You're responsible. Lots of other things that I cover in videos, but this I wanted to point out, and this is this exact same word, Mia, used right here and translated as one, should be translated as a or as first. And in both cases, it would actually better reflect everything that happened all the way through Scripture. You'd have a consistent story instead of having to make excuses for why God changed the rules. And he didn't. Where there is no law, there is no sin. You can't find a law anywhere that says that you can't have more than one wife. It's not there. It's just not there. God describes himself as having more than one wife. So that right there is one of the verses that keeps getting thrown or thrown at me and gets thrown out there. Now let me go to another one. We will only cover 2 verses tonight because I don't want this to be too long. But let's go to another one. Let's go to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2. You can tell I've been to some of these before. Okay? And so we're going to hit the enter button here, see if it'll pull us up. You can use this tool. This tool is available. In fact, Blue Letter Bible, for you guys that are students of the Bible, Blue Letter Bible has a great app that you can put on your phone, and you have access to all of these tools while you're sitting in the church pew, or you're sitting in Sunday school class, or better yet, you're sitting at Shabbat. Okay? Don't take your pastor's word for it. I don't care who he is or what his name is. Do your own due diligence. It says study to show yourself approved. Not assume that they're studying so that they can be approved and you just coattail it, right? No pastor's going to be standing next to you when you stand before the Most High and have to give account for why you believed what you believe. Okay? I strongly recommend. But here we go. Teaching on marriage. Now, concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. But because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. Hope, see, there it is. One, right? I think Jeremiah, and it might be in either chapter 6 or 16, warned us about the lying pen of the scribes. Okay? Because when a translator translates something, if he has bias in his head, if he has a particular perspective, or he assumes wrongly a particular direction the passage is supposed to go, he's going to translate it according to that perspective instead of looking at the totality of Scripture. But you know what? You are without excuse because you have access now through the internet and through modern, even the printing press. Long before the internet, I had a lot of books that give this information. It's just a lot more work to dig it out of Strong's Concordance, Thayer's, Brown Driver Briggs, all of the other books. I've got a whole bookshelf back over here. Used to have to do this the old way. It's a whole lot easier to pull it up right here on the computer. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this verse, okay? So the verse right here, but because of immoralities, each man, we can read down the side, it's just like the other one that we have, can have his own wife and each woman her own husband, okay? So the word is own. This is G 1438, heatu, okay? Heatu. I want you to notice something. This is the first word that's translated as own. Each man have his own wife, heatu. And then down here it says each woman is to have her own. Ooh, that's a different word. That word is idios. Wait a minute here. They used own for two different Greek words. We better do some hunting. We need to take a look at this and see what it says, okay? So if we go back, if you do the digging, and it takes a little bit of work to pull this out, going and showing a lot of examples. I'm not going to go into great detail here, okay? I want you to go do your own due diligence. But here's what you will find if you go study this. Each man is to have his own wife. He possesses her. This word right here means that she belongs to him exclusively. She is his exclusively. This would be like a master servant, and I'm not saying a master servant relationship between the two of them, though I do believe that a man and his woman is a master bond servant relationship. Scripture bears this out. But this is like a master servant relationship where the servant only has one head. And the servant belongs exclusively to. Nobody else can tell that servant what to go do because he, or in this case, she, has one master. Okay? And I know the feminist and the gynocracy and matriarchy right now are boiling over. But this is what Scripture says. Okay? So, heatu means exclusive ownership. If we slide down here to this other one right here, and this is a little more easy to show, and so I can show this quickly. Her own, each woman is to have her own husband. This word, idios, is not exclusive ownership. This is corporate ownership. There's a difference, okay? By corporate ownership, it means that you can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 25, 40 servants who all belong to or corporately own, if you will, the same master, right? Let me show you some quick examples here. This is an easy one to pull up right quick that will demonstrate this, because this is the one that's really the key to show. Let's go to Matthew chapter 9, verse 1. That'll take us to chapter 9. We're going to enter that. 9, verse 1. Getting into a boat, Yeshua crossed over the sea and came to his own city. Did he own the city? Did the city belong to him? Or was he part of the city? Okay? Corporate ownership, right? Let's take a look at what the word used here is. If we go down, we're going to scroll right down. His own city. We see that right here? And look at that. There's that word, idios, right? It means that Yeshua and other men, a whole bunch of them, all belonged to that city, but the way that it's phrased is his own city. This is exactly the same thing that you see in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2. Okay, we'll go back to that right here. Oh, we need to hit that right there. We got that. Go to. Okay. So this is exactly the thing that we see right here. Because of immoralities, each man is to have his own heatu wife, and each woman is to have her own idios, husband. Each man is to exclusively possess a woman, and each woman is to be possessed by a husband. That would be a better translation. Each man, and that does not exclude a man having more than one woman. It doesn't rule out. Paul's not writing against all of the fathers of the faith. He would never write and disparage Jacob or Abraham or David or Moses or Caleb. Caleb, one of two who were in the wilderness, righteous men who made it into the land. Two men, Joshua and Caleb, you remember? Did you know that Caleb had 5 wives? Scripture tells us this, right? He was righteous. God didn't strike him down in the wilderness. If having 5 wives was a bad deal, he would have been struck down in the wilderness. But no, he's listed as one of the 2 men from that generation that were righteous, right? So here's the thing. We've got to study, and we've got to use our noggin, and we've got to dig into Scripture and put the pieces together, because God is consistent. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I will talk about some of these other passages coming up. I've also got some very specific things to say about something else that Pastor Jennings said, and that's coming up as well. The point is, you have to understand the Scriptures, and you have to be able to do your own due diligence. Go do your own studying. And this right here is an example using Mia, okay? We use that in the Timothy and the Titus passages that talk about a bishop or an elder having, being the husband of one wife. No, it's to be the husband of a wife, okay? You've got to have at least a wife. You've got to have at least the starter pack, if you will. There in the comments, not in the comments, in the show notes information right down here, there are 2 papers written that are published on academia.edu. One is Paul's perspective on polygyny. The other is Jesus's perspective on polygyny. Both of them are about 10 or 11 pages. Very fast reads, but they've got some good, deep study pulling pieces together where both Paul and Jesus, both Paul and Yeshua, affirm in the way that they handle Scripture, or even directly point to polygyny, right? Jesus did multiple times with some very interesting statements that don't show up in your English, right? The translators didn't know what to do with it because they could only see the Greco-Roman standard of monogamy only. And so that's kind of a crazy thing, but that's truth, okay? I will have more information for you, and I appreciate the ones of you who have interacted calmly with me or asked me good questions. I'm happy to answer good questions, but if it's just a snarky comment, well, you dish snarky, you're going to get snarky, okay? I'm interested in people who are interested in studying the Word and finding out what truth is, and I'm happy to be corrected if you can show me where my studies are wrong. But I'm going to make you show me by taking me to the Greek or taking me to the Hebrew or taking me to the original languages, and you're going to have to show me in a big way. Okay? So, good stuff. I appreciate it. For all of my regulars, I really appreciate you guys. I especially appreciate you guys that maintained law and order in all the comments, because that particular video has blown up with, it's probably somewhere north of 400 or 500 comments now. It's crazy. And I expect the next couple videos dealing with some of the things that Pastor Jennings has said are going to also be interesting videos. You just go ahead and line up for them, right? But I appreciate you guys, and I love you guys. I love pursuing truth with you, and so let's do it. Let's take a look at what Scripture actually says and pursue truth, not pursue the teachings of this man or that man or even this man. Okay? Test me. Go check what I say. Read it in Scripture. Find out what the words behind the words say. Do your own due diligence. I tell you, this is a great tool, blueletterbible.org. I strongly recommend it as a place. You could also do eSword. You could do Logos. You could do, there are 4 or 5 really good Bible translation software packages out there, many that are free. This is free, that will help you dig deeper into the Word and find out what it really says. So, all right, guys, for King and Kingdom, I bid you shalom.